Chapter 14 of the Further Adventures of Robinson Crusoe. This recording is in the public domain. The Further Adventures of Robinson Crusoe, by Daniel Defoe. Chapter 14. Attacked by Tartars. It was the beginning of February, New Style, when we set out from Pekin. My partner and the old pilot had gone express back to the port where we had first put in, to dispose of some goods which we had left there, and I, with a Chinese merchant whom I had some knowledge of at Nankin, and who came to Pekin on his own affairs, went to Nankin, where I bought 90 pieces of fine damasks, with about 200 pieces of other very fine silk of several sorts, some mixed with gold, and had all these brought to Pekin against my partner's return. Besides this, we bought a large quantity of raw silk, and some other goods, our cargo amounting, in these goods only, to about £3,500 sterling; which, together with tea and some fine calicoes, and 3 camels' loads of nutmegs and cloves, loaded in all 18 camels for our share, besides those we rode upon; these, with 2 or 3 spare horses, and 2 horses loaded with provisions, made together 26 camels and horses in our retinue. The company was very great, and as near as I can remember, made between 300 and 400 horses, and upwards of 120 men, very well armed and provided for all events; for as the eastern caravans are subject to be attacked by the Arabs, so are these by the Tartars. The company consisted of people of several nations, but there were above 60 of them merchants or inhabitants of Moscow, though of them some were Livonians, and to our particular satisfaction 5 of them were Scots, who appeared also to be men of great experience in business, and of very good substance. When we had travelled 1 day's journey, the guides, who were 5 in number, called all the passengers, except the servants, to a great council, as they called it. At this council every one deposited a certain quantity of money to a common stock, for the necessary expense of buying forage on the way, where it was not otherwise to be had, and for satisfying the guides, getting horses, and the like. Here, too, they constituted the journey, as they call it, viz. They named captains and officers to draw us all up, and give the word of command, in case of an attack, and give every one their turn of command; nor was this forming us into order any more than what we afterwards found needful on the way. The road all on this side of the country is very populous, and is full of potters and earth makers, that is to say, people that temper the earth for the china ware. As I was coming along, our Portuguese pilot, who had always something or other to say to make us merry, told me that he would show me the greatest rarity of all in the country, and that I should have this to say of China, after all the ill humoured things that I had said of it, that I had seen one thing which was not to be seen in all the world beside. I was very importunate to know what it was. At last he told me it was a gentleman's house built with china ware. Well, says I, are not the materials of their buildings the products of their own country, and so it is all china ware, is it not? No, no, says he, I mean it is a house all made of china ware, such as you call it in England, or as it is called in our country, porcelain. Well, says I, such a thing may be, how big is it? Can we carry it in a box upon a camel? If we can, we will buy it. Upon a camel! says the old pilot, holding up both his hands. Why, there is a family of 30 people lives in it. I was then curious indeed to see it; and when I came to it, it was nothing but this: it was a timber house, or a house built, as we call it in England, with lath and plaster; but all this plastering was really china ware, that is to say, it was plastered with the earth that makes china ware. The outside, which the sun shone hot upon, was glazed, and looked very well, perfectly white, and painted with blue figures, as the large china ware in England is painted, and hard as if it had been burnt. As to the inside, all the walls, instead of wainscot, were lined with hardened and painted tiles, like the little square tiles we call galley tiles in England, all made of the finest china, and the figures exceeding fine indeed, with extraordinary variety of colours, mixed with gold, many tiles making but one figure, but joined so artificially, the mortar being made of the same earth, that it was very hard to see where the tiles met. The floors of the room were of the same composition, and as hard as the earthen floors we have in use in several parts of England, as hard as stone, and smooth, but not burnt and painted, except some smaller rooms, like closets, which were all, as it were, paved with the same tile; the ceiling and all the plastering work in the whole house were of the same earth, and after all, the roof was covered with tiles of the same, but of a deep shining black. This was a China warehouse indeed, truly and literally to be called so; and had I not been upon the journey, I could have stayed some days to see and examine the particulars of it. They told me there were fountains and fish ponds in the garden, all paved on the bottom and sides with the same, and fine statues set up in rows on the walks, entirely formed of the porcelain earth, burnt whole. As this is one of the singularities of China, so they may be allowed to excel in it; but I am very sure they excel in their accounts of it, for they told me such incredible things of their performance in crockery ware, for such it is, that I care not to relate, as knowing it could not be true. They told me in particular of one workman that made a ship with all its tackle and masts and sails in earthenware, big enough to carry 50 men. If they had told me he launched it and made a voyage to Japan in it, I might have said something to it indeed; but as it was I knew the whole of the story, which was, in short, that the fellow lied; so I smiled and said nothing to it. This odd sight kept me 2 hours behind the caravan, for which the leader of it for the day fined me about the value of 3 shillings, and told me if it had been 3 days' journey without the wall, as it was 3 days within, he must have fined me 4 times as much, and made me ask pardon the next council day. I promised to be more orderly, and indeed I found afterwards the orders made for keeping all together were absolutely necessary for our common safety. In 2 days more we passed the great China wall, made for a fortification against the Tartars, and a very great work it is, going over hills and mountains in an endless track, where the rocks are impassable, and the precipices such as no enemy could possibly enter, or indeed climb up, or where, if they did, no wall could hinder them. They tell us its length is near 1000 English miles, but that the country is 500 in a straight measured line, which the wall bounds without measuring the windings and turnings it takes. It is about 4 fathoms high, and as many thick in some places. I stood still an hour or thereabouts without trespassing on our orders, for so long the caravan was in passing the gate, to look at it on every side, near and far off. I mean what was within my view; and the guide, who had been extolling it for the wonder of the world, was mighty eager to hear my opinion of it. I told him it was a most excellent thing to keep out the Tartars, which he happened not to understand as I meant it, and so took it for a compliment; but the old pilot laughed. "Oh, Signor Inglese," he says, "you speak in colours." "In colours?" said I, "what do you mean by that?" "Why, you speak what looks white this way and black that way, gay one way and dull another. You tell him it is a good wall to keep out Tartars; you tell me by that it is good for nothing but to keep out Tartars." "I understand you, Signor Inglese, I understand you, but Signor Chinese understood you his own way." "Well," says I, "do you think it would stand out an army of our country people, with a good train of artillery, or our engineers with 2 companies of miners? Would not they batter it down in 10 days, that an army might enter in battalia, or blow it up in the air, foundation and all, that there should be no sign of it left?" "Ay, ay," says he, "I know that." The Chinese wanted mightily to know what I said to the pilot, and I gave him leave to tell him a few days after, for we were then almost out of their country, and he was to leave us a little time after this. But when he knew what I said, he was dumb all the rest of the way, and we heard no more of his fine story of the Chinese power and greatness while he stayed. After we passed this mighty nothing called a wall, something like the Picts' walls, so famous in Northumberland, built by the Romans, we began to find the country thinly inhabited, and the people rather confined to live in fortified towns, as being subject to the inroads and depredations of the Tartars, who rob in great armies, and therefore are not to be resisted by the naked inhabitants of an open country. And here I began to find the necessity of keeping together in a caravan as we travelled, for we saw several troops of Tartars roving about; but when I came to see them distinctly, I wondered more that the Chinese empire could be conquered by such contemptible fellows; for they are a mere horde of wild fellows, keeping no order and understanding no discipline or manner of it. Their horses are poor lean creatures, taught nothing, and fit for nothing; and this we found the first day we saw them, which was after we entered the wilder part of the country. Our leader for the day gave leave